Welcome to the History of North America. I'm Mark Vinette. There are many influences on historians that may change over time and lead to historical reinterpretation. Interpreting the evidence is the most fascinating part of an historian's job. Historians, however, must always be aware of bias or prejudice in the things that they read or write. Bias means being influenced by a particular point of view, while prejudice means judging before. That is, before you have all the facts. All accounts are an interpretation of the events, sometimes unknowingly. When historians read a text, they must ask themselves, what was the attitude of the writer to the people or events being described? How close was the writer to the event? These questions must also be asked of oral history, when people's memories fade and can become exaggerated or distorted over time. Historians themselves are influenced by the times they live in, and modern historians try to avoid applying the values and beliefs of the present to their interpretations or reinterpretations of the past. In historiography, the term historical revisionism is the reinterpretation of a historical account. It usually involves challenging the established, accepted, or traditional views held by scholars about a historical event or time span or phenomenon, introducing new or contrary evidence, or restating the motivations and decisions of the people involved. The revision of the orthodox historical record can reflect new discoveries of fact, evidence, motive, and interpretation, which produce a revised history. In certain controversial cases or dramatic circumstances, revisionism involves a reinterpretation of the moral meaning of the historical record and reversal of older moral findings and judgments in which right becomes wrong, and the virtuous heroes, good guys, or positive forces are depicted as sinful villains, bad guys, or negative forces. At a basic level, historical revisionism is a common and continuing dialogue between the present and the past, and the less controversial process of developing and refining the writing of history. Historical revisionism is thus the means by which the historical record, the history of society, as understood in its collective memory, continually accounts for new facts and interpretations of the events that are commonly understood as history. Some of the influences on historians that may change over time and lead to interpreting something in a new or different way are the following. Access to new data. Much historical data has been lost. Even archives must make decisions based on space and interest on what original material to obtain or to keep. At times, documents are discovered or publicized that give new views of well-established events. Archived material may be sealed by governments for many years, either to hide political scandals or to protect information vital for national security. When the archives are opened, they can alter the historical perspective on an event. New sources in other languages. As more sources in other languages become available, historians may review their theories in light of the new sources. Developments in other fields of science. DNA analysis has had an impact in various areas of history, either confirming established historical theories or presenting new evidence that undermines the current established historical explanation. Nationalism. For example, in school books' history on North America, it is possible to read about an event from completely different perspectives. School books may slant events to emphasize the importance of the contribution of their nations. Sometimes, the name of an event is used to convey political or a national perspective. For example, the same conflict between two entities can become two or more different names. The American War of Independence and the American Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the War of the Rebellion, the war between the states, and the war for Southern independence. As perceptions of nationalism change, so do the areas of history that are driven by such ideas. Wars are contests between enemies, and post-war histories select the facts and interpretations to suit their internal needs. Most wars have sharply different interpretations in textbooks in the countries involved. Culture. As regionalism has regained some of its old prominence in North American politics, events that had previously been dismissed as on the periphery are now given greater prominence to emphasize a larger number of interlocking events and influences. Furthermore, as cultures develop, it may become strategically advantageous for some revision-minded groups to revise their public historical narrative in such a way so as to either discover or, in rarer cases, manufacture a precedent which contemporary members of the given subcultures can use as a basis or rationale for reform or change. Ideology. Ideology influences how history is studied, interpreted, and written. It may be fashionable to see an epoch or event from a particular school of thought, such as free market capitalism or Marxism. Historical causation. Issues of causation in history are often revised with new research by revisionist historians who may reveal the social situation of an era was much more complex, and the question of what caused the turbulence requires renewed debate. Release of public documents. Compared to past decades, a huge volume of archived government records is now available under public access rule and similar laws. These can provide new sources and therefore new analysis of past events. Revision is the lifeblood of historical scholarship. History is a continuing dialogue between the present and the past. Interpretations of the past are subject to change in response to new evidence, new questions asked of the evidence, and new perspectives gained by the passage of time. There is no single eternal and immutable truth about past events and their meaning. The unending quest of historians for understanding the past, that is, revisionism, is what makes history vital and meaningful. Without revisionist historians who have done research in new sources and asked original, new, and nuanced questions, we could remain mired in stereotypes. An expansion and deepening of the pool of historians voids the existence of a definitive and universally accepted history, therefore, is presented by the revisionist historian to the national public with a history that has been corrected and augmented with new facts, evidence, and interpretations of the historical record. That is, readiness to challenge official explanations. Every period in history should be followed, in due course, by skeptical reassessments of supposedly sacred assumptions. For historical revisionism is an essential part of the process by which history, through the posing of new problems and the investigation of new possibilities, enlarges its perspectives and enriches its insights. Revisionist historians contest the mainstream or traditional view of historical events, and raise views at odds with traditionalists, which must be freshly judged. Revisionist history is often practiced by those who are in the minority and those working outside of mainstream academia in smaller and less-known universities, or the youngest scholars, essentially historians who have the most to gain and the least to lose in challenging the status quo. In the friction between the mainstream of accepted beliefs and the new perspectives of historical revisionism, received historical ideas are either changed, solidified, or clarified. If over a period of time, the revisionist ideas become the new establishment status quo, a paradigm shift is said to have occurred. The result, as far as the study of history is concerned, is an awakened interest in subjects that historians have previously slighted. These expanded horizons enrich our understanding of the past. but they also result in works of special pleading, trivialization, and downright falsification. So beware, for most historians are influenced by the zeitgeist and the usually progressive changes to society, politics, and culture influenced by the spirit of the time. These events often come with a concentration and violence for which the term revolution is usually reserved. These developments will and should raise new questions about the past and affect our reading of large areas of history, so that future revisions may be extensive enough to justify calling the coming age of historiography an age of reinterpretation. As the social, political, and cultural influences change a society, most historians revise and update their explanation of historical events. The old consensus, based upon limited evidence, might no longer be considered historically valid in explaining the particulars of cause and effect, of motivation and self-interest, that tell how and why the past occurred as it occurred. Therefore, the historical revisionism of the factual record is revised to concord with the contemporary understanding of history. As we continue our study of the history of North America, let's always keep an eye and ear open for historical reinterpretation, its positive attributes, negative effects, and good and bad influences on the fascinating saga of our continent. I'm Mark Vinette, and I hope you're enjoying the ride.